My name's Paul Joy. I come from a long line of fishing families. Our family's been fishing in Hastings prior to the 1200s, so we've a lot of history in the fishing industry. Initially, my parents wouldn't let me go fishing. I had to get a proper job. So for the first few years of my working career, when I left school at 15, I studied horticulture and went down a horticultural line. But after a few years, I managed to get back into the industry. I actually came in and bought my father's boat out, and then my father worked back for me as a boy ashore. So we ended up directly in the same place where my father had fished before, which is quite ironic, but obviously this goes back, I've been fishing now approximately nearly 40 years. So obviously we've got a lot of history in the industry, which has changed dramatically over the last few years. Hastings also has a very sustainable fishing industry, which is quite prominent in the UK. This started back in seminars in the late 1990s, where the Sea Fish Industry Authority looked at Hastings and did a seminar around the whole of UK. And on the basis of that, they picked Hastings out specifically, and it was as near perfect a fishery as could be devised. Now, on that basis, we decided to look at MSC accreditation, which in itself is a label for eco-friendly fisheries. Now, this was brought in by the World Wildlife Fund to give some sort of distinction between good fishing practices. And this is where we are today. We're the only fishery in the world with MSC accreditation on Dover sole, which gives us in a very unique position in the market employ. We also have MSC accreditation on mackerel and herring pelagic fisheries. So we do stand out a little different in the way we fish, and this is monitored in a way where the MSC label looks at all aspects of fishery. What it takes in is how you fish and selectivity. So you've got selectivity in the way you fish, you have damage to the environment, damage to the impact on the seabed, flora and fauna, and also discards. Now, the discard aspect is very important, because if you selectively use the mesh size you want, you can select the fish size you want. So obviously it's a very, very good way of fishing with very, very little discards. And that's how we managed to acquire MSC certification for the Hastings fleet. The Hastings fishery itself is a very old fishery, as I've already pointed out. It's mainly made up of fishing families that have been there for generations, such as myself. You've got several families which have been there for hundreds of years, and even almost to 1,000 years. The methods of fishing have changed very little. We're mostly a static net fishery, which is predominantly the mainstay, but we also do trawling, and we also do scallop dredging. We're a very mixed fishery in some respects. Effectively, we wait for the fish to come to us. We're non-nomadic, and we fish within 6 miles of the shore. What that means is the fish have to come to us and we don't go to it. So we're not able to differentiate which species we catch at all times. But we can monitor the size of fish we catch by changing the nets according to how we want to fish and what we want to fish. We believe this is obviously a vital way forward in the science of preserving fish stocks for the future. Hastings itself has a tradition of boat building in the area. What we have is initially used to be clinker-built boats, and they've built elm on oak construction and clinker-built. We have a lute stern vessel or elliptic stern vessels. The elliptic stern is like another bow on the back, and effectively that allows the boat to launch into seas easier and go at stern through the rough seas before it can make it out through the choppy waters on rough days. The methods of construction have changed quite a bit in the last years. We are now mostly steel vessels, and also we have fiberglass vessels in addition, and catamarans also are now coming into the prevalence of the fishing industry at present. So we've got a change in design, but very little change in the way we fish and how much effort we put into the mortality of the fishing fleet. The methods of moving the boats up and down the beach has changed obviously quite a lot over the years, especially the pushing out. When you come ashore, it used to be either a horse-drawn capstan or a winch or something to pull the boat up. But to get them down the beach, obviously, was a different matter altogether. And you had to work together as a group. What you needed to do is get all the fishermen from all the different boats around one boat at a time to get down to its launching position. So you accumulated round one vessel and you'd have one caller. And the caller would call in unison, so everybody pushed at the same time, and you wasn't defeating the object of having a lot of people and a lot of bodies there. So you all gather around the bow of the boat till halfway down the boat on both sides, and one would call, "Na helt," and it became a song. And then you go, "Na helt, push, na helt, push," and they'd gradually work like that until that boat's moving all the way down the beach. And as it went too fast and went over the brow and down over the steep part of the bank, they'd anchor a beach anchor in there, which is another thing we don't use today. It's some sort of device which like a plough to a certain extent, with handles at the top you could hold. So as it pushed and the boat began to run away down the beach, you push the anchor into the beach and that would stop it running away. And then you just release it up through the beach to let it run further when the men wasn't needed to push it anymore. Today we have bulldozers that push them from the front and they launch into the seas, and therefore it's easier to go at sea in rougher weather than it used to be years ago, where we used to have hauling off cables. These cables were laid out at sea on an anchor, and then you pulled yourself off through the surf. And these obviously is much easier to launch today with a bulldozer pushing you in, giving you some momentum to push through the surf, as opposed to how you used to pull it by hand through the surf. These are the basic differences in the launching and retrieving of vessels, which has changed in the last sort of 15-20 years. But the fleet itself used to be basically always around 44 vessels. We had 44 fishing vessels and we had 44 stades. Now the stade is which is associated with each vessel. The ground itself belongs to the Fishermen's Protection Society, and when we allocate a piece of ground it is there for perpetuity. It's then passed on to the next generation. Now there was 44 places, and there used to be a waiting list for fishermen to get boats on the beach. And this was right up until the late 1990s. So we had 44 boats and we had a waiting list for boats to come. Today we're about 27 vessels, and that's to the financial decrement of the industry itself. Nothing to do with stocks of fish, it's to do with how much we're allowed to catch, which is a totally different problem. Since our entry into the EEC, we don't want to get too entrenched in politics, but we gave away 86% of the fish at the European pool and we got back 12%. The fishing industry works on a share basis, and we call it 4 1/4 shares. You've got a share for the boat, a share for the skipper, a share for the crew, and a quarter share for a boy ashore. So you have basically it breaks down to 4 1/4 shares if you have 2 crew. Or the boy ashore share is made up of 1/4 of a share, 1/17 that works out to, equates to. So he gets 1/17 of a boat's catch. But with that, he gets what we call stalker. Now, stalker is an amount of fish which we wouldn't send to market, but we would give to boy ashore, and that enables him to sell a little bit of fish at the top to make his quarter share up to a viable wage. So if he gets 4, a boy ashore would normally have 2, 3, maybe 4 boats, one boy ashore. So he would make it up to 1 share by having 4 quarter shares. And he would also, on top of that, have his accumulated stalker, which is a mix of fish from all the boats. So we'd have the odds and ends which were not, we wouldn't deem it marketable, and we would just put it one side and put it in a box, and we're given this box of mixed fish, and that would make up his income by selling it up the top where the fishermen sell, or the boys ashore sell their fish at the top of the beach.